So, thank you for being patient, TL.
Yes, sir. No,
Now,
no problem.
just so everybody listening knows, this podcast is brought to you by a whole lot of patience and technical difficulties, but I think we got her licked now. Well, man, this was a short notice thing. I know we just talked the other day, but you've been a subject of conversation for quite some time between me and Colby over at Bear Hunting Magazine. So I'd like to give you a couple minutes. Let's introduce you and talk about some of your involvement there over at Bear Hunting Magazine.
Okay.
So what's your name? We got TL.
Yeah, my name's Tracy, but over the years, it's been a weird deal because I'm in the ministry,
Mm-hmm.
and um I've had people get confused about whether or not I was a male or a female because of the name.
That's an
So
important question in that field, isn't it?
it is, it is. So on social media, I just use TL, and I actually had a pastor in Montana one time that was passing out flyers, and he did not want to put Tracy on his flyers, and he didn't know what substitute to use, so he put Tennessee Jones.
Hey, that's a good alias.
Yeah, it was so funny because he went to some woman's house and knocked on the door and invited her to the meeting with Tennessee Jones. He said, "Yeah, I've heard of that guy." And of course, he just made that like hours earlier, and it was so funny. But yeah, it's a weird deal. I had a couple in Montana sit outside the church, I guess, for a long time. One time, decide whether they wanted to come in or not.
I had to hear your
So
voice.
yeah, it's a strange thing. My mom named me Tracy, but my family, if you talk to any of my family that knows me, they never use Tracy. It's always Trace. They drop the Y. So I'm not quite. And then other people call me my dad's name Terry. So I'm really not sure what my name is.
Just not late for supper, right?
It's crazy.
And you've been involved in hounds, you said, your whole life. You don't. There's a discrepancy about your first bear, wasn't it? You were saying.
Yeah, well, I'm 53, and my grandpa was a fanatical bear hunter. I mean, he loved it. My dad loved it. I have multiple cousins and relatives and friends who are all just bear hunting crazy when I was growing up. So I don't remember the first time I ever went. I mean, my dad and grandpa. They carried one of those little old flat Kodak cameras. The flat ones look like like an extended pack of cigarettes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so there's probably a picture on a roll somewhere that was never developed the first time I ever went. Maybe I'm not sure of that, but
Can they
I
still
just don't
develop
remember.
that? I don't know if they
I,
still do that anymore. Do they?
I've got some rolls of that. I'd love to know if I could get them developed. I'd just like to know what's on them. But so I don't remember the first time I ever went. It's just not one of those things like where some kids are 10 years old or 12 when you're in Montana. The first day you get to legally big game hunt, and
Right.
in Tennessee they just took us, and yeah, the first bear. My dad said that he took me in and let me kill a bear when I was small, but I don't have any recollection of it. So if somebody asks, how old when you killed your first bear, I don't know. Based on my dad, I was pretty young because I can't remember it. And but my memory, I was around 16. The first bear I can ever remember because there were few bears when I was growing up. Season was real short, and the grown men they were pretty ruthless in the deal. I mean, today, everybody wants to take a kid in to kill something. Well, that's not how the men were that I grew up with.
A little
You were,
different.
yes, sir. You were. If you got big enough to beat them to the tree, you got your chance. But if you couldn't, you just forget about it. They killed it, and that was the end of it. And,
That's incentive, huh?
yep, yep.
Where did you
So
grow up bear hunting?
I was born in Greene County, Tennessee, and our hunting was mostly here and in Madison County, North Carolina. The Appalachian Trail splits Greene County, Tennessee, and Madison County, North Carolina, and we hunted both sides. And then once a year, my family would go and friends would go to Canada, and I was able to go up there a couple times when I was a kid and really enjoyed that. So,
Oh,
um,
cool.
yeah, that's, but mostly here.
And you're still doing it.
Yep, yeah, enjoy it. I mean, I don't put myself in the classification anymore, or maybe never was, of the really hardcore type people I was privileged to be around. But I probably enjoy it as much as anybody.
Oh, that's the important thing. I know that's what we
Yep.
were kind of talking about, and I've talked with a couple buddies lately. It's like you got to enjoy what you can. Time and circumstances and all that plays a big role. So just enjoy the time that you're out there and the dogs, and that's the most important part.
Yeah, terrain has a lot to do with longevity in hound hunting, and just for instance, where we hunt here, most men begin to decline in their ability to be able to scamper through the mountains here. Probably 50, 45, 50 years old. You start downhill a little bit, and
Hmm.
not that you can't do it. It's just you're a lot slower doing it,
Yeah, that's
and
time is a tricky thing, man. It catches up
it,
real quick.
and not too many men past 65 are really what I would call, still have what they could do when they were 25.
Yeah.
But I've been other places, like we went to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan a few years ago, and I told Ben, I said, this is like taking 20 years off the clock.
Really? Just the
Yeah,
terrain's that much different?
just flatter. I mean, you take the flat off of it, makes a big difference.
Yeah, because you're hunting pretty mountainous country at home.
Yes, it's steep. I mean, the elevation will fool you because I spent 8 years in Montana, and people would say, "Well, what's your elevation?" And I'd say, "Well, it's right. It's just slightly below 5,000 feet. The highest point is." And they think, "Well, that's not a very big mountain," but it didn't matter if it's 3,000 feet, 5,000 feet, or 12,000 feet if it's steeper than a cow's face.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of like when you get in that steep country, it's not just what you see either. It's all those little finger ridges and
Hmm.
depressions and bowls, and like when you get into that mountainous country, it's a lot different. If you've never walked through something like that, you just don't understand. It could take you a half mile to go 400 yards, right? Like, but by the time you're up and down and around and side hill, and it can get pretty wild.
We had a guy come and stay with us, and I don't remember which guy it was now, but I remember him saying he went home and was talking to somebody about hunting here, and they asked him how to get prepared for it. And he said, "Well, he said get you um, one of these machines you walk on, a treadmill,
Hmm.
and incline it as far as it will go. Start running, and have your wife beat you in the face with a broom."
As you're trying.
And I laughed. I thought that was pretty good. But yes, it's pretty steep. I mean, we went to Idaho this year, and that's real big country where we were at, and uh, so I would say probably that chain in Idaho, and this here is Idaho's much bigger, as far as how far you would have to walk
Sure.
as opposed to here. But this is pretty steep here, and it's pretty thick. And Tennessee sells over the counter bear tags and don't have to worry about being overcrowded, if you want to put it that way.
Really?
Yeah.
So are you running your bear dogs on anything else? Like coon or
Uh, Ben hog hunts them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How
My
are they on a
son,
hog?
he does pretty good. I'm not against, hog hunting. It's just never been my favorite. I'm just not,
Sure.
it's not my thing. And, but he loves it. I'm not sure if he had to pick between hogs and bears, which one he would pick, because as soon as bear season over, he starts heading to Louisiana and Georgia and anywhere else that he can find a place to run. He just absolutely loves it. I mean, they catch a lot of hogs in a year's time in the spring.
There's a lot of hogs out there to be caught, huh? It's
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, if you watch some Animal Planet show that says, it's dangerous to walk to the mailbox without getting attacked by a hog, that's a little silly. And the problem hound hunters are having with hog hunting is, the limitation on the size of property you can run on gets continuously gets cut up for them.
Oh, just like private land parcels and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
There's only a few places, that are public that are going to hold the kind of hogs they want to hunt, and so it's a lot of private ground they have to run, and those parcels just get smaller and smaller as
Hmm.
the cities grow and homes get built.
Well, I know you and I were talking, and we got on the subject of like silent dogs and how, if that's your
Mhm.
cup of tea, that's great. But I'm assuming your bear dogs aren't silent. Do they run those pigs different for them? Are they quieter or are they just kind of the same as they are on a bear and open?
Well, a decent dog that's got any sense at all, is just going to use his mouth appropriate to the situation. But
Hmm.
we like a dog that's open mouthed, but don't confuse open mouth with babbling.
Sure.
I'm not. We're not going to tolerate a dog that just runs through the woods barking for no reason.
Oh, yeah.
But if one strikes and he's trailing, I want to hear him. And lots
Hmm.
of people like silent dogs. And to each his own. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying the primary reason I like to hound hunt is because I just absolutely love to hear a dog trail.
Yeah.
And, if you ask me, why would you go bear hunting? Why would you go hog hunting or anything else? Because I just love to hear a dog trail. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, and it's the part that you get regardless of the end result. I think it's the only thing that kept me hooked for a lot of years. We didn't do a lot of catching, but I listened to a lot of dogs, and you knew what was going on. And like I was telling you, I had that one dog. His name was Dale. And man, anybody who had never been around or anything knew everything that was happening. They might not know what was happening, but something was happening, right? There was a change
Hmm.
between the strike and the cold trail and the jump. I mean, like I told you, I could tell when he was going to rig before he even opened his mouth. Just by the way his feet were moving on the dog box, you could tell what was going on. And you and I were talking about, people just kind of missing out on that sound of the hound sometimes with everything else that we're dealing with during the hunt and how important that is. Like that sound of the hound is something that you get to hear whether they catch or not. So we did a lot of listening. We had some good sounding dogs. But that
Well,
babbling versus open, I think, is a good point because a lot of our listeners are experienced houndsmen,
hmm
and there's a lot of them that are not, and they're new to the sport. They're just getting into it or thinking about getting into it. And a babbly dog, maybe we should touch on that. It means they're, in my opinion, a babbly dog is just a dog barking for any reason other than letting you know it has the track. Like a
yeah,
dog that's just running and making any kind of barking, unless it's got a piece of the front end of that track. I personally don't want to hear it.
no. A babbling dog, you can turn him loose in the Walmart parking lot, and he's going to bark till somebody catches him.
Right.
I'm not interested in that whatsoever. I mean, when I say I love to hear a dog trail, I actually want it to be trailing something,
Right. Doing
not
something.
barking. We were hunting. We were hunting a few years ago, and there was one particular dog that was trailing across a knob on the foot of the mountain. This, this particular time, it wasn't one of our dogs, and that dog sounded like it was just absolutely just looking at a bear, just screaming like it was like the bear had already been jumped and was walking and it was looking at it. And I literally got out with my rifle. I thought the crazy thing was going to walk out on me.
Right.
And when the dog finally came into sight, there was nothing there whatsoever.
And it sounds like he's just looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I was totally fooled. I mean, I would have bet money and that the dog was looking at the thing. And a few minutes later, it was actually my cousin's dog, an old dog he had named Fred, which was really a reliable dog. Just he left that dog, went the opposite direction, went and crossed a gravel road, went up through a pasture field,
Really?
and went through a pasture field, went all the way up into the Forest Service, began to open, got other dogs behind him, and they jumped that bear and we ended up killing it later that day. But that Fred dog was smart enough. It took him just a few minutes to figure out that he was being psyched out by a babbler.
I get you're getting sucked in.
Once he realized what was going on, that was enough for old Fred. He went and found the thing and got it jumped.
Yeah, man, those babbly dogs, that'll screw up a lot. In fact, well, I know we were wanting to talk a little about screwing up bear races, and
Yeah, well, you'd asked me, to talk on the subject matter of blowing up bear races, and m- maybe we should put it in a positive spin and say how to raise your percentage rates.
there you go. See, that's the way to think about it. Babbly dogs are not on that list of things to do to help your success rate. Let me
No,
tell you.
no, that's not on the spectrum of raising your percentage.
No, but I mean, the thing is, you're bona fide, man. You've been hunting bears a long time. You do a lot of writing for Bear Hunting Magazine, right?
Well, my son and I and I tell people this, and this is not false flattery. I was fortunate enough to be born with a dad, a grandfather, two or three cousins, and a son who are all better bear hunters than I've ever been. So I have been surrounded by, I mean, some of the very best. I mean, just as good a houndsman as you could ever ask for. And not only them, but also, men that I grew up with that I may not have been related to, but were just phenomenal hound people.
Hmm.
So I've experienced a lot, seen a lot, whether it was me personally or other people. And you can definitely raise your percentage rates on catching bear if you pay attention to some things that you would think would be obvious, but maybe it just takes a while to catch up with you. And the number one thing I would say, and Ben and I, of course, Ben's my son, we talk about this all the time. And to me, the number one thing in raising your percentage rates is just being willing to be honest with yourself.
Sure.
Because what happens is you'll get a dog or dogs and you get attached to them. You have an emotional attachment to them. And all hound people get mad if somebody lies to them, but nobody lies to us more than we lie to ourselves.
Yeah, it's a little hard being honest about something you're feeding sometimes.
And you just have to become personally ruthless in the evaluation of what you're turning loose. And if you will ever be honest with yourself and then make the hard choices, your success rate goes up drastically.
Just due to the quality of dogs that you're feeding.
Yeah, the quality of dogs that you're feeding is probably, on top of that. But I think some people may have better dogs than they know. They just don't really know how to get that dog better. For instance, you could have a guy whose success rate's low and he feels like it's his dogs. But if those dogs are in the hands of a different guy, that guy may want to buy them back
Yeah,
after about
right.
6. Yeah. And so when I say be honest, the first thing you think is quality of dogs, but a lot of times it's quality of handler. You sometimes you got to be willing to say, is there something I don't know? Am I missing something here? I mean, why am I not doing any good? Is it me? Is it the dogs? Is it the terrain I'm hunting?
Sure.
What? And be honest, with yourself about it. And if you ever get to the point to where you will be brutally honest with yourself and then make choices based off of that honesty, your success rate's going up drastically. That's to me, that's the thing I would tell everybody above anything else.
That makes sense. And being honest, I mean, to me, like another way I think of that is you have to know what you want to have a
Hmm.
measuring stick. And if you don't,
Hmm.
which I suffered for a long time, like I wanted to run dogs, right? And we were bear hunting and I loved that. Then we couldn't really bear hunt because we lost it in California and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I would always just wanted a dog that barked, and I could go listen to and have a good time. But once I was forced, like, hey, man, this isn't just a commodity anymore. Like, you got to make a real effort to do this. What do you want? And then it was a little easier to make those decisions, even though they were hard. Like, you had a measuring stick. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually read an article on that for Bear Hunting Magazine about breeding to a standard.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you want, then it's impossible to get it.
How you get there? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, see, that goes back to this honesty deal, and you'll have a guy, and I hope people who hear me talk understand I don't want to sound like I know everything because that's not the point. I'm just saying from what I've seen, and there's probably lots I still need to see and need to learn, and hopefully I will run across the people I can learn it from before it's too late. But you'll run into a guy, and he will tell you this is the best dog I've ever had. This dog's awesome. He's fast. He's this. He's that. He's this. He's that. Then you get to see the dog work, and the guy seems like he's a liar because you see the dog, and from your experience, you understand that's a subpar dog.
Sure.
It may be subpar because the dog itself is subpar and don't have the abilities to be any better. It may be subpar because that dude don't know how to help the dog. But either way, it's not what you believe. And your assumption is this guy's just a blowhard. He's a liar. That's probably not true.
It's not an intentional thing. It's a different measuring stick.
Yet he just hasn't had the life experience to see something past that. I guess if I could put it in these terms, think about a guy who had never seen anything but a Mustang. He lives out west. He's in Arizona. The only thing he's ever seen go across the field is a wild Mustang,
Mm-hmm.
fastest horse he's ever seen. But the Mustang, if he somehow picks it up, hauls it to the Kentucky Derby
A little
and puts it
different.
against the Secretariat, I mean, there's going to be no comparison. I
Right.
mean, the Mustang's going to be rounding the quarter pole when Secretariat's crossing the finish line.
Yeah.
And that's true with hounds. And a lot of folks, for different reasons, eh, haven't been exposed to exceptional dogs. And that's could be true for us. I mean, someday we might be, me and Ben and the people we hunt with, we might wander into somebody and realize, holy smoke, we thought we had great dogs. We hunted this dude.
Yeah, that'll happen a few times in your career, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but that's the truth. And, if you don't know what to measure up against, it's what I tell people. Like, when you want to change, if you want to change game, a good friend of mine told me, he says, it's 3 years. If
Mm,
you want to switch pieces of game and you want to be successful, you're 3 years between finding out how to do it, how to make yourself do it, how to get the dogs that know how to do it or train them how to do it. And, it takes a lot of effort to be successful when you're switching up like that because it is different. He says, like, I was running blue ticks. That's
mhm.
pretty much what I ran, was primarily blue dogs or blue walker crosses. And then when we started running these gray fox, I did a lot of listening and a whole lot of not catching. They
Right.
just they didn't run with the same track style, so I had to switch dogs, completely. And that was a rough decision in some ways. In other ways it was super easy. Those dogs were getting old; they weren't able to hunt anymore anyway, so we took the opportunity and just jumped ship and went and tried something different, and we've been enjoying it too. So I
Well,
don't know. Measuring
that,
sticks are tough.
that breed loyalty, um, is okay, but there's so much diversity within breeds
Mm-hmm.
that you can't say, well, a blue tick's better at this versus this, that, and the other, because I mean, you could go somewhere and probably find some guy that's been breeding registered blue ticks to run faster game for 50 years, and they may be as fast as whatever you switch to. You just don't know. I mean,
Sure.
and same thing with plots. Clay Newcomb was here the other day, and he asked Ben. He said, Ben, he said, and he was doing a special on plots, and he said, now you like plots, right? And I got so tickled at Ben because he said no. He said, I like my plot.
It
And
makes
what he
sense
meant,
though.
and what he meant by that is the plot, the plot breed is so diversified that you can't just say, well, I want to be a bear hunter, therefore I must need to hunt plots, because you may have found a strain of plots that are great, you know,
Hmm.
one thing, but not another. So it's really strain specific in any particular breed. And then, of course, this will make so many people aggravated at me, but I'll say it anyways. Is a lot of people have this idea. Well, if something's crossbred, it's automatically better simply because it's crossbred, and
Mm.
that could be true or not true. But the fact is, a dog is what's in those genes, and then what's done with those genes, and whether it's quote purebred or quote crossbred is not what's important as a methodology. What's important is what's in those genes, regardless of how you come to that.
Yeah. And I think another way, like another word that comes to my mind is just a track style. So it doesn't
Hmm.
matter to me what color. Like some of mine got running walker in them, some of them got, other stuff mixed in. So it's not
Hmm.
so much a breed or a strain or a specific cross, but it's the track style. And that is what I want. So whether they look like a walker dog or they've got, flag tails or whatever, it's really that track style that if they can't all work together and they're working against themselves, that makes it worse.
Well, we're getting off track to the subject we were supposed to talk about, but that goes back to your standard, and what Ben and I agree on about dogs is that people ask, what's the number one trait you're looking for if you have to start somewhere? And to us, it's, does it produce game?
Hmm.
Like if you could get a basset hound that every time you found it, it was bait or tree on a bear, it wouldn't matter how short its legs were.
Right?
It wouldn't matter how long its ears were, because a dog with longer legs and shorter ears that didn't catch game would be useless. But if that old basset hound somehow is ending up every day treat or bait on a bear, then there's no need to talk about how long its legs are or if its
Sure.
feet are, you know.
It's getting the job done.
Yes, and that to me, that's where you got to start. Everything else is an accessory. You got to have that base model before you start adding accessories.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
And the base model is, does it catch game? And then, is it consistent at catching that game? And that's what people ought to ask. We all of us should ask, if I load my dogs in my truck and I go somewhere and turn them loose, are any of them going to go catch something?
Hmm. That's that being honest part.
Yeah. So, but our subject on blowing up bear races or raising your percentages, we started off by talking about, uh, being honest with ourselves. And then if we want to stay on that subject, what I would go
Yeah.
to would be um, uh, the actual turn loose itself. I think is where you make or break what's going to happen the rest of the day.
Yeah, let's get TL's tips and tricks for not screwing up a bear race. Up your percentages. What kind
Yeah,
of tips we got?
up, up your percentage. We all mess up races for sure, but over a process of time, we see ourselves make the same mistakes. And I can't tell you how many times in life this happens. It happens all the time. If you Whether you are at a bait or your dog strike you out of the truck or whatever it might be, that bear track's already what it is. It's fresh, it's old, it's in a feeding ground, it's not in a feeding ground, it's straight away, it's through rocks, it's something. A bear went somewhere and done something, and it did it at a certain time. The dog's responsibility is to pick that up and go find it. There's some dogs that are real good at it. There's some dogs that are not.
Hmm.
And there are some dogs that are exceptional at it, and there's some dogs that are just fire at it. There are some dogs that are worthless at it, and it may be because they don't have the skills to do it, or it may be because they haven't had the opportunity to learn. But
Sure.
on any given day, my preference is if I want to kill it. Now, if you're training season and you want to give your pups an opportunity to learn the trail, you also understand you're giving them an opportunity to mess up. That's fine. But if it's kill season and you got a bear track and this is one you want to kill, I mean, you want to kill this thing and you don't want to mess it up under any circumstances. The way we like to do it is one or two dogs that we know what they're doing. Now they have the possibility of not being able to get it straightened out. Nobody's 100%,
Mm-hmm.
but the dogs that know what they're doing, the percentage is obviously higher than the ones that don't. You want Larry Bird taking the last shot, or do you want Tracy Jones taking the last shot in the NBA Finals?
Right.
I want Larry Bird taking it. So we turn Larry Bird loose and let him get on out there. And that guy turned him loose, if he's hunting him enough, knows him. And like if Ben and I are standing at a bait somewhere, or if we're even for just turning loose off of a strike, depending on what dog it is, one or the other of us could tell you you're probably good to turn another dog loose now,
And
or
just
hold
slow feed.
hold out. Yeah. Now there's some things that are just so hot you can just dump the tailgate. I mean that, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
If it's just so hot, you can just back up and turn the entire circus loose on it. It's different, but I've seen dogs blow that up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you turn Larry Bird loose and let him go on. Feed another one behind him when you know he's ready to be fed into. And then you say, well, I know most people that listen to this podcast will say that's kindergarten stuff. We know that, but maybe. But
There's a
I
lot of
see it.
guys who don't.
We see it over and over and over. Guys that they just don't have the patience to wait. I've got to get old Brummy in there. I got to get it. The other dogs get too far ahead. Well, at that point, you got to ask yourself a question: is it more important to you to feed old Brummy in, or is it more important to you to kill that bear that day?
Right.
And if it's training season, send old Brummy in there. So, if I were going to summarize, so that we won't get stuck just on this for the next hour, you just need to turn the dog that knows what it's doing loose. Let the guy that understands what that dog's doing direct everybody, and feed the dogs in a way that dogs that don't know what they're doing quite yet, are not as good at it, don't overrun your front dog while he's working a track and blow things up. So what you're assuming is that bear has walked that night. He could be anywhere from 300 yards away from you to 3 miles away from you. You don't know where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
I want the front dog to get far enough ahead of the next ones I'm going to turn loose that he will get out there and have the track straight and moving before I start sending things behind him that might not quite understand what's happening, and maybe just, they learn by following the other dogs at first.
Mm-hmm.
Then they run the track too. They smell the track, but they're also learning from the other dogs, and I don't want them overrunning him.
Sure.
But that happens all the time. People just they won't hold them. So I feel like that the turn loose is really important if you want to kill something.
So when you're turning dogs loose like that and you're waiting to feed them in, right?
Hmm.
My question would be is are you waiting to feed him in until that dog's like lined out enough that he's not going to pay any attention to some barking behind him? Like, because I think of my dogs, if there's a big lose or something and they hear a dog barking, they're generally going to honor that dog. If they don't have it, they assume he does and they go there, which is something we look for in our type of hunting. But with bear hunting, if a dog's coming in behind and barking and that front dog makes a lose, are they going to keep trying to figure that out? Or is it just going to throw a wrench in things and have them second guessing the situation? Or is this like you're waiting until it's actually a jumped race before you're feeding dogs in and you feel like they're really, really moving it?
Well, I think to us, it it really you really are dependent on the guy who's turning that first dog loose to know that dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess an example would be I had a dog that just died last year. His name was Crow. When you walk through the mountains, you could just let Crow free cast with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had the other dogs on a leash or had them with you and Crow was free casting and you heard him open, if he barked more than 4 or 5 times and was taking a line, you could go ahead and start feeding dogs to him because there was no foolishness in him.
Sure.
He wasn't going to be babbling. He wasn't going to be on trash. And if he barked more than 4 or 5 times, you could pretty well figure he had it.
Gotcha.
So when he would hit that fourth or fifth bark, you could turn your next dog loose that you knew would go join helping him trail.
Not
But
just
if
another dog, a strategic next dog, right?
a strategic next dog, I I wouldn't turn my trainee dogs loose until at least fourth or fifth. But if I was running 6 dogs, I'd
Mm-hmm.
want my I'd want my dogs because I everybody wants those pups up front, but I'd rather my pups be on a successful race as a blow up.
Oh,
They'll
sure.
they'll they'll follow those other dogs. They'll stay behind them if they got any gumption, And when they finally do catch up, something will actually be happening.
Oh, that makes sense. So I know a lot of guys like starting with puppies. Let the puppy start it, and if they can't get it going, then you throw out another. But then it's just every minute it's getting farther away. Potentially in my
Yeah,
eyes, I like letting them mess with it. But like you're saying, if you're wanting to get on it and get it caught, there's nothing wrong with making them learn behind a good dog. You're not throwing them in behind just something of its equal, right? You're throwing it in behind the cream of the crop, what you're considering to be your best start dogs. It's not going to hurt them, that in my opinion either. It does them a lot better. Like you're saying, that opportunity just went from an opportunity to smell a bear to possibly an opportunity to catch a bear just in how you're releasing these dogs out for those pups.
well that's our specific topic. We're not talking about training pups today.
Right.
If we were talking about training pups, our whole approach might be different because it would be training season, or it might be a smaller bear, or we might not even be wanting to kill this particular bear this day, and that we wouldn't have to worry about taking a chance. We're talking about a definite day that we want to kill something, and we don't want to goof it up.
Sure.
Yeah, we're not talking about training pups. We're talking about killing bear.
Right. So you said they wouldn't be down your list until probably your fourth or fifth. So
Sure.
when you're looking at your start dogs, I'm assuming like you've got your pack figured out, like your dogs. So you've got
hmm
your start dogs. I mean, what do you call your next round? What would you call them?
I don't know to have a name for it. It just you just know which one's going and not coming back. Um, like um, I have a dog named Gideon, and Gideon's not what I would call a cold trailing dog at all. But if you pulled up on a bait and the dog struck out of the box, I could mirror Ben or whoever could pull Gideon out and turn him on the bait. If he comes back to you, you know that it's not super hot. He's just not a cold nosed dog. He
Sure.
don't. He's not going to grab out a track. But if I turn him out and he hits it right away and just begins to go away from you open, you can turn about anything loose then
Because it's
because
hot.
it's Gideon and not Crow. Yeah.
So you're using the dog's gauge as a gauge on the track. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your dog should be your. If you know your dog's telling you what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And or like Gideon's real good about not going the wrong direction on a real hot bear. Like if the dogs cross the road and sometimes there'll be a situation like here's a good example. And the we were on a road and say the road's running north to south and the dogs were coming from the east and going across the west. The bear run out in the road and I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a kid standing in front of my truck and I was having to tell him to move to get out of my way so I could pull up to go put more dogs on it. When I finally got that kid out of my way and pulled up there, I turned Gideon out of the truck and he went exactly on the bear's backtrack.
Because it.
I was so mad. I was so mad I could just spit. And I was yelling at Ben, don't turn more dogs loose. Gideon went the wrong way. Don't turn more dogs loose. And finally, another guy standing there got me stopped, got me settled down. He said, listen, he said, you didn't see it. But when you were trying to get that kid away from the truck, that bear was in the middle of the road. He turned and went back on his own bear track.
Oh, so he had it the right way.
He had it. I was the one confused. I I was ready to, put some stimulus on old Gideon.
Oh, sure.
And I about blew the race up yelling, don't turn more dogs loose. Because I thought Gideon went the wrong way. And, I thought the other dogs would fall in behind him. And the guy told me, he said, no, 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 no. He said, you don't understand. You don't understand. The bear turned, went right back on his own track. So, uh, that kind of stuff happens, but the dog knew. So, and that's a strength of that particular dog is he just don't normally go the wrong direction, even when I thought he would. So if you pull up on a situation and you turn him out and he takes a track a certain way, you're pretty good chances that's the way it went.
Where with
He's
other
not going.
dogs, yeah,
Yeah,
possibly. I know I've had those dogs that are hot one. They can't. It's almost harder for them to figure out a hot one.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yep, exactly.
And then, yeah, we try to get involved and we got a 50-50 shot. I think the dog's got a better average than we got. Because I'll bet that happens more than we think. I noticed it with small game too. Is they come out on the road and then all of a sudden the track's just gone. Well, you didn't see him double back. You know,
Hmm.
it, it's kind of crazy when you got to realize that we're playing a partnership with that dog too. So if you, like you said, that dog, it's probably going the right way. You can kick him in, but
This is it's actually a good transition from the turn loose, which I think we've emphasized enough how important it is to get a good turn loose to make sure everything's going the right way.
sure,
But those to packing on throughout the day, if you're going to pack on to a race, there's a lot of races that are legit races, and the dogs have had the bear all day, and then somehow on trying to feed more dogs in it gets blown to smithereens. And the number one above all, from my personal observation, is what we call face packing.
define that one.
When you're standing in a road or a trail, someplace where the dogs are coming directly at you
Uh huh.
because you positioned yourself, you know where the dogs is going to come into the road or the trail, and they're coming straight at you. Well, people will pull up and pack dogs straight into the face of the bear and the dogs coming at them.
Mm-hmm.
That that blows up a lot of races because that bear sometimes my dad he really drilled this into my head when I was a kid. A lot of times that bear, especially on an all day race, he may be 500 yards ahead of the dogs. And I know people say, well, that means the dogs are too slow. I don't want to hear that nonsense. that bear might have went through a cliff and got away for a little while.
Sure.
You don't know that bear may be a good piece of head dog. So imagine that the dog's coming at you and you're reading him on the Garmin and you know he's 400 yards coming straight at you. What you don't know is that bear's already made it to the edge of the road, took a right hand turn in his loop and going back the other way.
Hmm.
So you pack straight to your dog, and those dogs then are running to the bark of that dog. That trailing dog hears them and thinks, "Oh no, they packed on up there," or whatever they think.
Sure.
Yeah, so he just lifts his head and comes on straight to your dogs, and then nothing has
And that first round of dogs is not happy.
it. Yeah. Then, then, then the dogs in somebody's truck blows up, and it just creates a great deal of chaos, and that packing on business. Face packing to me is just, if the dog's coming to the road, stay back. Don't even get to where it's coming straight at you. Stay back away from it. You
Hmm.
know, 200-300 yards, and keep all the dogs quiet. Don't let nothing in the truck bark
That
or
was
loud.
one that hit me hard when like people were always like, "Well, keep your dogs quiet," but nobody ever explained it. When you're new, it's like, "Oh, just shut your dog up." There's a reason, like in a really good reason for keeping your dogs quiet, which is not fun. Like training them, they hear a dog barking and they're in the box, they want to do that. But like you're saying, that's a huge issue if those dogs are pushing something your direction and they're hearing other dogs bark. I think that's pretty universal across game species, even. So, how do
Well,
you? Man, that's
well,
another topic. I could go down a whole rabbit hole with you on training too, and I want to keep it to this for now, but we're gonna have to probably follow up on some of these, bud.
you got a whole compilation of things going on with a dog, because sometimes you want him to stay on a track no matter what. You just want that nose down. You want him on that track. You don't want him to pay attention to another dog. But because we pack hunt, there's times when he should pay attention to another dog. I
Hmm.
personally believe dogs learn each other. I personally believe that if you hunt smart dogs together long enough, they know who to pay attention to.
And who to ignore?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think they're smart enough to figure that out sometimes. But in a roar of dogs, that signifies to that dog trailing, wait a minute, that thing that's bait up or it's treed.
Sure.
So it creates havoc, and not keeping your dog quiet has blown up a many a race. Loud trucks will blow up a race. People, take your truck, have the, I don't think it's a big deal anymore because of all the stipulations about emissions and stuff. But back years ago, first thing people did when they bought a truck was take it to the muffler shop and have dual exhaust put on it.
Right.
And the bears, they learn to stay away from them vehicles, stay away from them trucks and stuff. I hear that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Then the whole packing deal too, like you have a couple dogs that's been on the bear all day long and they're just walking it. I'm not a huge fan of packing in fresh dogs there, because that tends to be a time when you can get the bear's tired.
Hmm.
He's already decided he's not going to treat. He's tired. The dog's following him tired. They're probably not even engaging with each other much, other than just the dogs are walking behind him barking.
Sure.
And those fresh dogs go in. Uh, it changes the whole dynamic of everything. And so, or if a bear's crossing, like left or right, you don't, you wait till it passes you.
So when you're turning in, I mean, what do you consider a safe time? When you've let those dogs keep trailing to a point where that bear is headed away from your location and you're packing dogs in like behind them?
Yeah, that to me, that's the rule of thumb. You
Hmm.
want the dogs on the bear going away from you.
However that is, you just don't want them having a head-on collision and causing a whole upset. Give them some
That's right.
time to get them turned away, and then you can just send that dog in that direction and they start coming up,
Yep.
The
If
hope is
if
from the rear.
if it crosses the road, let it cross. If it's in a place you don't want it to cross the road because of boundaries and stuff, make racket. You know,
Turn it
I'll even hiss my dogs in the truck to let them know it's okay to bark,
just to get it
or
turned.
I'll go back and act like I'm going to dump the tailgate. And when I do that, they know it's okay to bark now.
Sure.
Know the difference. Get them barking or blow the horn or do something, get it turned, and then when you hear the dogs or start going away, then you're pretty good then to go ahead and start turning back into it because you're talking about upping your percentages. So your percentages are higher if you're not the one blowing it up.
Sure. But you hit on something when we were just chatting the other day about that and the two dogs. If you've got two that have been staying on it all day, you said sometimes that'll change the situation about relaying dogs in and whatnot and being successful. Do you remember talking about that with me? And we could go back and talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, what we're talking about today is wanting to kill the bear. If
Mm-hmm.
you've had a couple dogs or three dogs on it and they've been on it all day, they're tired. Bear's tired, so they're just walking. And those dogs have adjusted to that bear, and he's adjusted to them. And I'm not calling it a mutual agreement like you would be with people, but they know what he's
They know
going to
what they're
be doing.
dealing with.
Yeah, they know what they're dealing with, and he knows what the bear knows what he's dealing with. So they're just walking along. If you want to kill it, to me, the best way to do that is just have somebody go in and kill it. Just kill it to the dogs that's on it. You don't have to load it down with a whole new fresh pack for them. If they've been on it all day, they're going to stay on it.
Right?
So just go ahead and slip somebody in there to do it. Now, if they walk it across the road and it's going away from you, you might want to catch those tired dogs off and put fresh ones on him.
Sure.
But, um, sometimes a bear that's been walking all day, if you put fresh dogs on him, he'll just take off again and catch his breath, take off again. The tired dogs drop out. Fresh dogs may run him out of the country. That's just the choice you got to make. But
So it's one of those things where that bear is going to adjust to what's after him too.
oh,
I
God,
think of it like a rabbit race. They say like a rabbit only runs as hard as it's pushed, right?
well,
Do you feel that the bears are the same way? Like they've had a chance to catch their breath after walking with those tired dogs, and all of a sudden they can just grab another gear once they're being pushed harder.
I can't prove this, but it's my personal belief that every bear has a different personality the way every person does. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think bear are generic in their personalities. Some of them are going to fight all day long and all night long, and they are not going to tree, and it don't make any difference how many dogs you put on them. And I've heard people say, different, but I promise you, there are some bear that are not treeing, period,
Mm-hmm.
for that particular day. And it don't matter if you've got 5 on them or 50 on them. They're not going up.
Right?
And I can't prove it, but I believe this is true. There are some people who love to fight.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
I mean, they just love it. I mean, they will purposely wait to get off on Friday just to go to a bar and start a fight because they want to fight. They want to find somebody to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them find their way into the professional fighting, so they have an avenue to do it that's legal.
Right?
They're just some people, man. They just love to have a scrap, and there's some people who they don't like confrontation at all. They just soon, some of those bear would just soon climb a tree and be done with it.
Sure.
So I think some of that is out of our hands because we can't have no black bear personality tester that we can, get a blood sample off of that day. Just
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that though, because I'm of the same belief. I think that if a dog can come into a room, I hear Clay and Brent Reeves and those guys talk about it. They don't just smell soup, right? They smell the tomatoes, they smell the potatoes, they smell the garlic, they smell all these pieces. I think that these dogs know the exact piece of game that they're running if they've ran it more than once, especially if it was a bad experience. I think personally that those dogs know just by the smell of it because they're different like us. You say everybody's personality can be different or pheromones are different.
Mm-hmm.
I can't prove it, but I'm of the believing that they know. Like you get them on something raunchy and they've had to deal with it before. I mean, maybe that dog's not whooped, but he's sure whooped off of that one. Like I don't know if that makes any sense or what you think on that, but I do think they know the difference.
Well, I think that goes back to the personality of the dog, and that's where you get your worst train wrecks.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been around dogs that love to fight. I mean, that was their thing. I don't. I'm not talking about fight other dogs. I mean, we call them gritty,
Right.
but
They'd stick with the
they
mean
just
one.
love it. Oh yeah, if you turn them on one and they can get a hold of it, they're gonna catch it, and they're gonna catch it again, again, and
Right.
again, and again, because that's what they want to do. They love it. And a lot of people have this idea that you're forcing these dogs to do these things. Oh no, that dog, once he's unsnapped, he does exactly what he wants to do
Sure.
or don't want to do. It's of his own volition. And some of them are scrappers, and some of them will scrap if necessary. I mean, I'm not out tonight looking for a fight nowhere, but if you walk in my house and grab my granddaughter, I'm gonna try to find the fortitude to beat your brains out.
Right.
And some bear, I think, are that way. They're not fighters, so to speak, but they will if they get harassed enough. And some of them, some men are passive. Some men, literally, you could walk in and grab their granddaughter and they just watch you leave with her because, they don't have any fight in them whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And some bears are that way to me. Some of them seem to love to run too. They're just like track athletes. They just seem to love to run.
Yeah. It's interesting. So, like in your area, do you notice like those bears that don't like to climb? Is it, do you think it's an individual basis, like strictly on that? Or do you feel that some of it is learned behavior?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I've given that a lot of thought. I definitely believe some of it's individual personality, but a bear maybe that has had multiple conflicts over a process of time, may have figured out, well, if I go up a tree, they'll be here after a while. And if I don't, I may never see them today. I'm not sure. That's a good.
I just, I remember reading, it's a book called The Bobcat Dog or Bobcat Dog by David Pegtail. And he was talking about bobcats specifically, but about how in certain regions, in certain environments, like they just didn't want to climb. They'd choose a rock hole over a tree or whatever. And it just seemed
Hmm.
like it was geographically associated, like they had these resources, so they used them and never learned to use the other. And those bears, it's funny because I think about all those 125 pounders that got Nikes on and can run for days. And, that's different than sitting and trying to bay up or stand up for the dogs. You just wonder how that translation is. Like you said, if you DNA test each one and know it, it'd be kind of interesting, as like a psyche study on these bears. I just I was thinking about David's book in that, and I tell guys, any dog could catch the right piece of game, right? Like you find that pacifist bear that doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to do anything. A dog looks at it and barks once, and it climbs a tree. Any dog can do
Yep.
that. That might change who you're turning
Hmm.
in and what order you're turning it in to avoid that blow up. Like you were saying, it seems like the order and how you relaying and your observation as a handler, like all of that's fluid. You're constantly assessing the situation. Like you said, your dog that it's going to be hot. If he turns out and lines out and it's going, that changes who you turn loose next. Or if you I mean, are there situations where you just drop the tailgate and cowboy it?
Oh yeah, yeah. Generally when I shouldn't.
It's a
See,
reminder of how to blow
that
stuff up.
that see that's the whole point of the conversation is I don't care how long you hunt, can get so excited and so fired up that you do stuff totally against your own judgment. I mean, you know better. And you just get so wired and so fired up and you do it and you know you shouldn't do it. And after the fact you feel bad about you did it. You shouldn't have done it, but you did anyways.
Right?
You're it's just you get so excited, but we're talking about raising their percentages, and I guess that's probably part of it is you've got to learn to think cerebrally at the same time that you're jacked out of your head.
That's a good way to put it because it's the bug, right? Like we can't shake it. It's like every time that animal would cross the road, all the old timers would tell us, you don't turn loose on it. Give it 10 minutes, let the scent settle, blah 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 blah. And as a kid, you're like, yeah, right. I just saw this thing cross the road. We're dumping the box and we're gonna go catch this thing. And you know what? By golly, 9 times out of 10, those old timers were right. It's like
Yeah,
you just get overzealous and you want to get them going instead of thinking about the situation. So feeding them in, I
I mean,
mean, like you said,
I mean
from the very start. Oh,
my
go ahead.
Gideon dog. I mean, my Gideon dog. If you turn him out and he hits red hot and takes off, you can probably dump the box because he's not a cold nosed trail dog. And if he's taking something out, like it's on a rocket, probably everything else you got in the truck can too.
Sure.
So I would feel comfortable, dumping the box. And I guess it depends on who's with you and what's in their box. But the dogs that Ben has that are used to hunting with Gideon, with the exception of this year's pup that's just getting started, all of them should be able to just be dumped. But there's people that will pull up with a truck, and even if you should dump in the box, they dump, and their dogs will run straight down the road. They'll hit the backtrack, and it's some of it's operator error, some
Mm-hmm.
of it's the dogs haven't been given the experience and different things. And so when you ask, are there times you can just dump the box? Oh, sure, absolutely. But even then, what you're dumping matters, I think.
Sure. So, like with Gideon, because you're saying he's that kind of, I don't want to say cold nose. Like you can gauge the age off of him easier. If he doesn't get
Oh
it
yeah,
going, do you
yeah.
do you like specifically select him to gauge how old the track is, and if there's something that can't get lined out, you have your, let's say, a colder dog in mind that you're going to put out and still try to catch that bear?
Well, Gideon's not, Gideon's not Ben's primary trail dog. I'm just using his example because that's easy to use as an illustration.
Oh, sure.
But but before my crow dog died last year, if you say you pulled up to a bait, you turn Crow and Gideon out on the bait. It's very possible that Crow would go up there and bark maybe one time and you not hear him again for 10 minutes and Gideon come back to the truck.
Okay.
And then both of them are pretty trash free. So I knew Crow's not running trash. He's just smelling something that Gideon can't smell, or Ben says he's too lazy to run a cold track.
Yeah, I guess you put it that way.
And so uh, Crow goes on up in there and hits another time. I've already put Gideon back in the truck. Well, 10 minutes later, Crow's a half a mile away, hammered down because he's got it jumped now.
Mm-hmm.
So if Gideon had been by himself, he didn't ever went and jumped that bear. But at the same time, at the end of the day, when everything else is exhausted and a lot of dogs have just physically exhausted and worn out, Gideon may be the dog that literally is on it till 9 o'clock the next morning.
Right.
Because
So,
once it's up and he's looking at it, he just has a lot of stay power. And I'm not trying to use my dogs as an example. It's easy for me to illustrate. There's better
Oh,
dogs
that's
than
perfect.
Crow. There's better dogs than Gideon, and I'm just using them because I know them.
Sure. No, and that's a perfect example because everybody should
Yeah.
know which piece of the puzzle. I think of a pack like a puzzle. Our dogs are a little different. I'm not looking for an independent dog per se. I try to judge them all independently, but they
Hmm.
have to be judged independently and on performance in the environment, right? Like in the pack environment. So
Yeah.
you're picking and choosing what pieces you have and who fills what spot. And I think, like, thinking back to what we've been talking about here, like you said, if you're pup training, that's different. Like today,
Hmm.
we've been talking about being successful. Like this is an actual hunt. Because
Yeah.
I think that if you're using your own mind and you're really thinking about the situation and you're trying to not blow it up, right? Like we all try not to blow things
Yeah.
up on purpose
Right.
all the time, but when you're really thinking about it, I may have to be okay with two or three of my dogs possibly never even seeing the race. Like you're saying, that dog gets out there, he's quiet, he's slipping out, he's lining it out, and as soon as he's comfortable talking about it, all of a sudden he could be right on it, and it's one of those bears that just jump up treed, and he's the only dog that caught it.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another point that you and I discussed before about, getting something treed and then people packing to the tree, which I don't see any reason for that whatsoever. There might be a rare case where you have a bear that's jumped out multiple times in a day and one dog's left on it at the end of the day treed, and before you can get there it'll jump again, so you pack 3 or 4 dogs down to the tree so when it bells there's fresh dogs on it.
Sure.
I can see that, but for the most part, if it's treed, I just want to leave it treed. I'm not gonna pack dogs into a treed bear just so I can walk in and bring them out, or worse, pack them into a tree so somebody else has to bring them out for me.
Yeah, so you're a big fan of, like, if they don't make the tree, they stay in the truck. You don't turn them loose in unless, like you said, certain situations, it's a jumper.
And unless there was just, I mean, some massive reason. Well, if you had a weird situation where a pup just somehow popped a bear tree, and that you don't even know if that pup will stay at the tree more than an hour.
Oh, sure.
You don't know, and you don't want to take a chance on losing that bear. You might pack some to him, but for the most part, no. But the dog ain't there when the bear goes up. He just stays in the truck.
Yeah. No, and I
Yeah,
think that's one of those topics that there's a lot of guys on both sides of that fence.
yeah.
Guys
Well,
that
I
are
don't. What other people do don't bother me, but I
sure.
mean, it bothers me if they're with me. It
Right.
especially bothers me if, like, they're not going to go to the tree and get their dogs and bring them back.
Hmm. So
Like,
what's your logic behind that? I mean, just for everybody listening, like they didn't do the job, they don't get the reward, or is there another reason that you just don't have them there?
well, for one, I don't think you should take advantage of other people. For instance, I'm not able to get through the mountains the way my son can.
Hmm.
If my son's in a place that I know I'm not going to get to, I'm not sending 5 more dogs to the tree just so he has something else to lead out.
Sure, that
The
makes
bear's
sense.
treed, he's at the tree. They can kill it or not kill it. And there's 3 dogs there. Why send him 5 dogs to have to bring out?
I'm
I
sure
don't
he
think
appreciates
I don't
that.
think that's fair to him. And he probably wouldn't say anything to me about it. He'd probably just bring the dogs out. But I don't think it's right to do that to him. And I don't think it's right to do it to other people.
Sure.
Now, if those 5 dogs have been on the race all day long and I can't physically get to where it's at, but 2 other young guys are, that's not the same to me.
No, no, I see what you're saying. So it's just more that than it is a learning tool for the dogs. Do you feel like they're learning anything at the tree if you just kick them in?
Well, yeah, I think if it's training season and a dog's never been to a tree or he's never been to many trees, and you're going to go down there with him, and the bear's moving around in the tree, and the dog gets to see it up there again. More exposure is probably helpful to him. But we're talking about killing bears,
Hmm.
so I'm not going to send dogs into a tree where you're going to kill a bear because that's just five more to lead out.
Yeah, or drag
But
behind you.
yeah, now I mean, if you say, well, it's tree, it's not going nowhere. I got a puppy that's never been where a bear's been killed. I want him to see it. I understand that, but
Sure.
we're talking general purposes. Those dogs are not going to contribute anything to the killing of that bear. They're just going to be more of a nuisance to me.
Hmm. Just more pieces in there.
Yeah, I don't see any reason for it at that particular time. And the other thing too, I don't think gets brought up enough is the shooters. Who's going to shoot this thing, and what are they going to shoot it with? And I think I think the animal and the dogs deserve for that thing to be killed as immediately as possible
Sure.
without any mitigating factors afterwards. And that's not always able to happen. And you know how hound hunting is, it's unpredictable.
Oh, sure.
But for us, like for instance, I'm not a personal fan of hollow point bullets in revolvers.
Why
And
so?
I know there's guys out there going to say, no way, man, in my book, it's this many feet per second and so on and so forth. But there was a time when I could sit down and name multiple bears that had been shot and not killed on the spot, but had to be dealt with later. It's just simply because the ammo the person was using couldn't get the job done. Now, if you can make a perfect shot, you can kill them with anything.
Sure.
You know, pound for pound, it's not legal, but pound for pound, 22 Magnum will kill them dead or no hammer.
Hmm.
But a lot of times on the ground, you don't get the perfect shot. And so that those, especially like a 44 bullet, if it's a hollow point, it already is reduced in velocity because you're shooting out of a shorter barrel.
Hmm.
And then it's already a big enough diameter that you don't need it to be any bigger. You want a 22 250 to mushroom because it's a small diameter. There's
Right.
no reason for 44 to need to be mushroomed.
Yeah, that's a
But
chunk of lead
that,
anyway.
all that mushrooming is soaking up energy. And if you hit bone, the velocity's low. And if you hit fat, real thick fat soaks up a lot of energy. It's not uncommon in people trying to kill bear where when you skin one out, you'll find the reason it didn't kill it is because that bullet's still stuck in the fat. It didn't even make it to anything to kill the bear. The bear wouldn't even have died
Really?
from it. Oh yeah.
Just because of the expansion and it just absorbed all that energy. And I mean, because some guys, I mean, I know in some areas you got fatter bears. Like we have bears out here that, I mean, I've killed two or three of them and there's not an ounce of fat on them. But like a real fatted up bear, I mean, how thick? You're talking several inches of fat that has to go through sometimes, right?
On certain places on that bear's body, fat can be 2 inches thick,
Yeah,
and it'll soak up that energy.
that's
And
wild.
so I don't, like I said, I'm a happy-go-lucky type person when it comes to other people. To each his own. I don't care what anybody does on their own thing. But for us personally, we don't like to see anybody with a pistol, like a semi-automatic type pistol.
Hmm.
I know there's a fad for people to start carrying 10 MMs.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, not a fan of that whatsoever. I'm not. I don't want nobody carrying a pistol. And if you go to a revolver and I want you to have something in it that's either solid and jacketed or hard cast
Just a
because there's
solid
no,
hard cast bullet,
it, well, it can be lead as long as it's jacketed, and
but
it
not
can be
just like a straight wad
hard cast.
cutter or something like that. You try to stay away from.
I, uh, I don't want nothing that's not jacketed. It's too soft.
Gotcha.
But if you're shooting a 44 pistol, and I say 44 because that's the common thing people, are going to show up with. You don't hardly ever see anybody with a 41, which, 41's a good round. A 357 is a good round if it's in the hands of somebody that, is capable of using
Sure.
it. And I don't hardly ever see anybody carry anything over 44 because the recoil gets so bad that people just can't efficiently shoot them.
Yeah.
But
Now,
those bear,
are you talking about those like as a protection, like on one on the ground or out of a tree? You guys are harvesting with pistols and jacketed.
well, no pistols whatsoever. But if you're going to carry a revolver, you may end up shooting it out of a tree with a revolver,
Gotcha.
uh, or killing it on the ground, either one. And I bring it up. I mean, uh, on a podcast, you shouldn't be on a soapbox because we're having a general discussion. But
Sure.
this is a soapbox of mine about using the right ammo. Everybody gets consumed with what rifle to have or what revolver to have. But in it, you don't kill nothing with a rifle. You kill it with what comes out of a rifle.
That's a good way to put it.
And so everybody, well, what kind of rifle do you carry? Well, I carry a Remington or a Ruger or this or that. Well, what kind of ammo you got? I ain't sure. Well, you're not going to run that thing down and club it with your rifle.
Right.
So what's important is what's coming out the end of that barrel.
It'll
So
up your success rate. I mean, like even out here
yes,
spot and stock, the last bear I killed, he had a hollow point round stuck in his elbow. Somebody had taken a
hmm
pop shot, it looked like, and I'm assuming it was a pistol. It looked about like a 9 or a 40. It was hard to tell. But, if you want to
yeah,
be successful and you're not using the right equipment, you're not going to be. That thing walked away, healed up, survived. I can only imagine, we've seen what can happen, unfortunately. You don't want a bear wounded. That's going to ruin your day. You want to see it dispatched as quickly as possible and humanely and all that because it means everybody walks away a little better off. One that comes out without using the proper ammo, I can see how that could cause some issues.
if you were to poll the people in the area here where I live that have bear hunted, say, X amount of years and have seen quite a few dead bear in that time, not that they killed them all themselves, but they had been around a lot of bear kills.
Mm-hmm.
I think in our country through here, you would probably get more people to say, I'll take a 30-30 or a 35 Remington over anything.
Really?
Yep. And bear hunting don't change from area to area. I mean, I carry a 45-70 rifle.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I have a 45-70 is because we lived in Montana and they started posting grizzly signs around where we lived. And Ben was going in his 270 bolt action to elk hunt with, and I wanted something big enough to knock down a grizzly if it run after us.
Oh, sure.
So, but it's not something as big as a 45-70 is not necessary, for bear hunting. 30-30, 35 Remington is my favorite. 200 grain round nose bullet is an effective machine. Nothing wrong with a 30-06, uh, or even But what we ask people to do if they come here and hunt is we want them to have something that light because we want them to have it with them. You
Mm-hmm.
want it shorter because you're probably going to be in the brush, and you want open sights.
Makes sense.
We don't want people hunting with us with a scope rifle. If they do, their shots are going to pretty well be limited to it being in a tree.
Right.
Because if you got it caught on the ground here, the laurel's thick and it's dark under the laurel. you're just not going to be able to distinguish a black bear from a black dog.
Sure. No, that
But
close range makes sense.
so I mean, this is all plays into our raising the percentages because you want the bear dead.
Right. You don't want to lose it over a missed shot opportunity just because you got the wrong equipment.
Yeah, and the bullet is the main thing. I would love to be able to poll the audience that listens to this podcast to know how many people out of 100 even know what ammo they've got.
Maybe we can find a way to do that. The comments. Maybe we could do
Yeah,
like, or in our podcast group or something. Do a. I'll have to look into
what
that and see if we can do a
what
poll.
what brand it is, what bullets in it. I'd love to know the percentage of people who even know what ammo they're carrying.
So self-serving question then, because you shoot a 45-70,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you, it makes you feel like a bear hunter just carrying one of them because you can shove your thumb down the barrel. I mean, that is like the gnarliest. I'm a lever fanatic. I always have
yeah,
been. I've inherited, the family stuff all the way from like an old turn of the century Winchester 94 and 30 Winchester up to like, 375 Savage, 308s, 45-70. That 45-70, there's something about it. When you pick it up, you got a piece of tool right there. Like that's going to
yeah.
take care of the job. But
Well,
what are you running, like a factory load through that, or are you running a hand load?
I reload mine, but I'm shooting the 405 grain Remington core lock, which I can't even find anymore.
Good old core
I've got
locks.
about, yep. I was, you remember when they used to advertise those, the deadliest mushroom in the woods?
Yeah, deadliest mushroom in the woods,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I like those bullets. They've been time tested over the years to just be good. They're just good bullets. They're nothing fancy, but I can't find them now. So I've got like 19 rounds left for that 45-70 that's loaded that way. And if I lose them or run out or whatever, I'm not likely to run out. But if I lose them or something, I'd probably just have to go to a hard cast because I can't find those anymore.
Well, if anybody from Remington's listening,
Yeah,
by some
yeah,
odd
help
chance,
me
we
out here.
got somebody here who needs some stuff. It's
Help
funny
me.
because I just switched over. I've tried or primarily always hunted with a 7 mag, and here in the big timber, when we were bear hunting, it wasn't a big deal because they weren't really on the ground. They usually treed, and you could get a good shot. But I ended up with this 308, and I said, those nozzler partitions, they're good for big game, but I'm going back to core locks, and I started shooting them in a bunch of stuff, and thinking
Yeah,
like over the course of time, that probably has to be one of the most game taking bullets out there on the market.
yeah. And there's no question about it. It's just tried and true. I'm the kind of person, if it works, I don't see any reason to change it. And I'm not, and I'm not a gadget person.
Yeah. Well, that's why you got wheel guns and levers, right?
Right. Right. Uh, semi-automatics. My dad and my grandpa both, and myself, all had um, 30-06s, the Remington 742s.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather's was a standard size. My dad's was a carbine, they called it. And then mine was a standard size, but Ben took it and had it cut down. And he's used it to bear hunt. I haven't used it to bear hunt with, but those old Remington, as long as you don't have a jam problem, that's a good round. Uh, in the 30-06, I like the heavier bullet, like 180 grain round nose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of the round nose because of the way they cycle.
Less jams in the action, just
Yeah,
they feed better.
they just feed better.
In the heat of the
Yep.
moment, that's pretty important. That's something people don't think about, but that first shot counts. That number two shot sometimes could end up being way more important real quick.
Well, it's I wasn't there. I was just a kid. They had a deal years ago. I've got a picture of them in the cave. My dad and Papa and the buddies they were hunting with lowered a guy they were with down into a cave to shoot a bear in a cave. The dog and the bear was in the cave together, and
Oh,
he had an
jeez.
old 30-06 and it jammed him
Oh no.
and him down in the cave.
Yeah, I don't want to be
So,
there. No,
but
thank you.
so I like a lever action. I actually really like a bolt action. There's a reason that those guys who hunt in Africa on those big five shoot uh double rifles. They
Hmm.
have independent. From what I understand, I'm definitely not a gun guy, but I've been told they use those because they have independent triggers, meaning if something happens to the trigger mechanism on one side, the other trigger is totally independent.
So you got to back up.
So it's very unlikely the statistical odds of it having two malfunctions on two separate triggers. And then, past that, they're bolt action guys.
Hmm.
So I'm a big fan of the bolt action, but I have literally, I just out of pure desire to want to have something different, I have looked and looked and looked and looked for a bolt action I thought would be a good brush gun. I tried. I think I think the model was maybe a Remington 600. Don't hold me to that, but they
Hmm.
were shorter, had open sights, and were produced in a 35 Remington. But
Oh,
I was never willing to pay what they wanted for one because you got to buy them used, and the people want them, view them as collectors' items. And
sure. I found one years ago and I bought it for my wife because I'm a nice husband. AKA, I wanted a new rifle and I already owned two 308s, but I wanted this one. There was that Ruger Scout model. You could get it in 223, 556, or you could get it in 308. And that I thought would make the ultimate brush rifle other than a lever gun because it was super short. You could attach a red dot if you needed to, but it was open sighted. Um, I think this one it had peep sights, with a ghost ring and real short compact rifle like a carbine lever gun. But that's what I was gonna shoot through. It was those Corlock 308 180 grainers, and that's a cool little rifle and fun to shoot because it's based off of the M77 platform.
oh,
That might be one to look into for anybody out there. It's a little pricey. They came out with them years ago. They were real popular in 223, but the 308, man, it's a fun gun to shoot, and it's definitely, I think, if I were to go back and be bear hunting again in the brush, it's definitely a top contender of what I'm going to grab next to that 4570.
I have a brother-in-law that's a big fan of the 308. I've never owned one,
Mm-hmm. Well, you might
but I
have
imagine
to.
it would do real well.
We might have to send you some pictures of one. Check them out. I think they're still making them. I'm not a gun nut either. I know what I like, and I kind of just stick with that. And usually, what I have in my hands is what I like at that moment. But I'll send you over some pictures or something. Let you check this thing out.
Um, we were in along the same lines. If we go away from the percentage rates of the ammo, I think it also needs to is an important discussion about who you're going to be willing to hunt with.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot to do with your percentage rates too, because you can take one guy who he's just dead set on being successful. He wants to have good dogs. In fact, he probably wants to have great dogs. And he's willing to put the time and the effort and the exertion and the sacrifice into doing it. Then there's other people who just they enjoy more the social aspects of bear hunting,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe being around people or talking on the radio or something along those lines. And what happens is you will have this one guy who literally trades his life to be successful at this one thing. And then other people will sort of like just filter into it and want to just, hang around it and benefit off of it. And I personally think that you need to have enough respect for certain people's dedication to something to not be the one who messes it up for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you want to invite it back a second time.
Yeah, well, I mean, even even uh even my own son, I mean, he's a bear hunting psychopath. Well, I'm not so much at this particular point in my life. Definitely not anywhere near his level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be right for me to create a situation that reduced his ability to be successful, even with him being my own son.
Sure. Nobody
And
wants
I
to
built,
be the reason, something goes south.
sure. So on success rates, I think you have to, at certain time, there's a reason that the Major League Baseball teams don't hold random tryouts and ask people to come from, you know, the general community to the tryouts.
Right.
It's already through, you know, from kids that have been practicing from T-ball all the way through grade school, high school, college, minor leagues, and then even very few of them is ever going to see the field for a major league team. Well, there's some guys out there. I mean, they're bear hunting fanatics. I mean, they're good at it. They know what to do. If you're going to hunt with one of those guys, be respectful of who they are and the knowledge they have and the desire they have to be successful. Try to be a benefit to them. That's all I'm saying. Try whatever you can do as a part of that process. Make sure it's a benefit to the dude who's given up everything to make it work.
That's harder to do in the moment than a lot of people think. Because you don't realize, I guess when you're in that stage, you don't realize you're in that stage. I think back to the guys I was hunting with, and, unintentionally, I was that guy that was just there and I was having fun. I like talking on the radio. They all joke about that still. And now I get paid to talk. But, it's like you enjoy all those things, but I'll say, yeah, it caused some rough times too, and unfortunately lost some good hunting partners over it unintentionally. And now looking back and going back and talking with these guys, years later, it's like, yeah, you know what? I didn't give the value to what you're doing. Like you weren't just catching animals because there was a reason. There was a system, there was effort, there was dedication, there was sacrifices made. Where now it's different. If I go hunting with somebody, I don't even like my personal thought is I don't turn a dog loose unless somebody else says to. Even now, like if I got dogs that I know can catch it, if I'm hunting with somebody until the words, hey, you can kick a dog in, they sit in the truck because I don't want to screw up their success rate like we're talking about. They do this every time they go out. The dogs know what they're doing, the hunter knows what they're doing. So sometimes it's hard to notice you're that guy when you're being that guy, but later on you realize you you were being that guy for a lot of time. So
Well,
new hunters.
to me that's just basic respect of another human being. If
Mm-hmm.
if the guy that I'm with knows what he's doing, I ought to listen to that guy. Let I don't need to be in charge. Let that guy be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Let him call the shots because the real key is to be successful at the end of the day, not who gets the credit for it.
Yeah. No,
And
that's
I
a
tell you, that's definitely a percentage raiser. Letting the guy who knows what he's doing, call the shots during the day's time. It's hard on a man's pride too, because you want to be the man. You want to be the guy.
everybody wants to be the guy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to get to be that guy, unfortunately. and a lot of open mindedness and a lot of reflection too. Because I know you've done it. I've done it. Everybody that has been in this for a while, you think about those races long after they're done. Why did it go wrong? What happened? Was it me? Was it the dog? Was it the situation? What caused this? And a lot of times, I can tell you in my early days, it was me. And it's taken a long time to get past that. So I think hopefully, this is helpful for some guys, especially. We think of bear hunters as being around forever, and yeah, we have historically been bear hunters as houndsmen, a lot of us. But there's a lot of new guys getting into it that really, like, look at Montana. They just got their bear season, right? So there's a lot of guys getting into this, and hopefully this episode will be helpful for them at being successful. We'll have to do a follow-up. We'll have to talk about training since we stuck to the successful part. But if you got time sometime, bud, I'd definitely like to get you back on and talk some young dogs and some training and stuff like that too.
It's pretty simple to know where you're at in the pecking order of things. You just have to ask, if I went and did this by myself today, what would be happening?
Yeah.
That guy there was doing it by himself, what would be happening? And if that other guy catches just as much game without you as he does with you, he don't need you. You need him.
Yeah. And acknowledging that goes a long ways with people. Oh, man, that's the truth. Well, shoot. I appreciate you coming on today, TL. We probably better wrap this up. We're going on probably close to an hour and a half, but I would love to have you back. And I really appreciate you hanging in through all of our pre-record endeavors.
Right. Just give me a holler.
I will. And I'd like to encourage everybody, if you want to see more from TL, go get yourself a subscription to Bear Hunting Magazine. Colby Moorhead over there. There's really good stuff in there, especially if you're a new bear hunter. I know they try to get a bit of hound content in there as well. It's a good resource. So I'd encourage everybody to go check that out too.
I would mention one thing since you're plugging the magazine.
Sure.
If you have listeners who hunt other things and they would like to experience a bear hunt with hounds or like to specifically try it in Tennessee, my son has Pale Horse Outfitters, or he calls it Pale Horse Guide Service.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, let's give him a plug.
It's Ben Jones at Pale Horse Guide Service, and he does a good job, and I think there's some folks out there would really have a good time.
Well, we'll have to get a link for his guide service. We'll put it in the episode notes here too. And maybe we'll have to drag him on to one of these someday.
Yep. You probably should have had him on instead of me, but
we'll save the best for last. How about that?
That's the way it would be. Yeah, that's right.
Right on, bud. Well, again, thank you so much, TL. We'll look forward to talking to you again.
All right, man. See you.
All right.